So when I was young, I remember one of my teachers, a drawing teacher or art teacher in elementary school, kind of indicated to me that my drawing skills were really good and that I will grow up to be an artist. And prior to that, my father was an engineer, and my mother used to draw little drawings for us. She was very good at it. But I had never considered becoming an artist. And so when my teacher in 8th grade, I believe, or 6th grade, I can't even remember when, said that to me, it kind of buried itself in my psyche. And so when I was looking to go to college after high school, that was the first and only application I made to the one and only art school in Lahore, Pakistan at the time. And I got in. And they would take 200 students from all around the country. And that was the maximum students they would take. And they took me in. But my mom was really, really worried about my welfare because it was a co-ed school. And in Pakistan, the male and female populations were kind of segregated. And so she was really worried that I would get a bad name because that was really important. You know, women in Pakistan were supposed to be mothers or kept very safe. It's a very patriarchal, or used to be a very patriarchal culture. And so I had to promise my mother that I would study textiles and not painting, because she was also concerned for my later life, where I may not be able to find a job and would be dependent on a man to look after me. So she said, since Pakistan is a cotton producing country, it will always have textiles to export, so you could always get a job. And so I made that promise, so that's why I studied textiles, because she wouldn't let me be a painter. And now look at me, I'm doing everything. So it was kind of interesting. So A Beautiful Despair, in a sense, originated from my first sculpture, which was called Intersections. And of course, I've done multiple other designs in the cube. But really, when I was thinking about sculpture in the air, it was, in a sense, in my thoughts and in my imagination, it was conceptual drawing on the walls. So if you notice, the shadows create drawings. And then, of course, there are multiple other things that are part of the layers of meaning that is part of the cube project in itself. Many other artists have done cubes, but never the kind of cubes that I've done. And so it was a combination of the East and West. Some of it was influenced by the Alhambra in the beginning, but now I kind of reference back to my own culture, to Northern African countries, to the Middle East, to South Asia. I have interests in pattern, and pattern was often kind of told to me by my professors in grad school that pattern is a very female thing. It's very decorative. It's doesn't carry much meaning. It's just a surface thing. And here I'm using pattern, but also in a subversive way. You know, for me, it is about creating value for women, for people who often have lived on the outskirts of light, you know, where they have been excluded. And so my desire to create space for women was to make it into a feminine space that allows everybody to be present, everybody to be included. So it is an inclusive space. So A Beautiful Despair really was because during the pandemic, my older sister passed away. And I was watching news constantly, and I was really entrenched at NPR and CNN, and also occasionally would watch Fox News to just kind of get a balance. And I realized how many people were losing their loved ones. And the biggest loss that we had during the pandemic was the loss of community, which people often didn't really care that much about. But when we lost it, we realized how much we needed it. You know, being able to touch people, to hug people, to be in the same place as other people, just so we could see how people exist with each other. And so I think this A Beautiful Despair piece kind of came alive because of that. I wanted it to show the beauty of community, but also the losses we had all suffered. And I think the world really suffered quite a bit. And but then the other aspect, the beauty part of it, was that while we were all quiet, human beings, meaning we were all quiet and the airplanes stopped moving, the birds started coming back and the bumblebees started coming back, and it was really beautiful to sit out amongst the trees and just listen to them. And so nature started resurging, and I thought that was the beauty part of it. Like, we had loss, but we had this resurgence of nature, which was wonderful. And I think that's why I wanted to call it A Beautiful Despair, because it was a bit of both. So when I was young, very young in fact, and my mother was still alive and well, she used to hold these sewing circles in our home that was often encouraging to women from the neighborhood to come. And they would help re-sew the quilts every winter season or in autumn. And what happens in Pakistan is that the quilts are made of cotton wool on the inside and cotton on the outside. And so they would open up the quilts, bulk it up again, and then re-stitch the quilts again. And I would often sit underneath listening to their stories. And it was a very interesting development for me, I think, because I heard about violence to women. I heard about education or limitations of education. Often the women talked about joblessness for their husbands and how many children they were having, and the contraception not being allowed to them. So those types, and I was very young, I didn't really understand a lot, but I would often sneak under to just listen, because it was like story time. And so I remembered that when I was starting to make work that had a community aspect, which allows people to be included. And what I've noticed in these spaces that I have created over the years, that people often talk to each other. And when they talk, they forget that you're black, brown, yellow, green, purple, orange, what kind of background you come from, whether you're Islamic or Jewish or Christian or Buddhist. It doesn't really affect people, because that spiritual moment of connection opens people up to talking to each other. And I love that inclusivity that was like a major side effect of these light-based works. The second through line was, of course, creating this inclusive environment for women, and in turn for other minorities as well, because once I started living here, I realized the kind of problems we have in our social dynamics, race against race, religious entity against religious entity, gender versus gender, and it was just so many complications. And so I needed to make work that was representative of what was happening in my time. And then, of course, the third thing that has now encompassed everything in my practice is the issues that are connected to climate change, that are going to affect all of us and are already affecting all of us. So some of my work is about commerce and capitalism and colonialism. That particular work, Stealing Beauty, kind of references that. It deals with the idea of how first in a couple of decades we may not have nature to go and visit outdoors, so we may have to come indoors to see it. And of course, many of the regions that were previously colonized will pay the price again, and already are. So that was those are the three through lines that have kind of permeated through my entire practice and become more and more entrenched. But I want to do it in a way that makes people want to come in and listen and talk and create dialogue, not become defensive. So that's why I use beauty in that respect. men have made beautiful things too. But somehow their work, male artists' work, even if it's beautiful, is considered legitimate. And since I've been in this country and we've been having this conversation, that work made in textiles or with thread or needle or embroideries, they are very particularly craft. And when I was going to grad school, that was a topic that we dealt with on a daily basis, because every class would talk about my ability to craft beautiful things. And the critiques were brutal in that respect. And I was like, but that's where I come from. I come from a place where I, as a female, Pakistani female, was supposed to be beautiful and quiet and very repressed and never talk about anything other than giving birth to kids and being a family, creating a family. And so beauty for me means very subversive, because what I am doing is I am taking that beauty and putting it out there and saying, through color and embroideries and beautiful aspects or the reflection or the shadows, that beauty can be something that hides a multitude of sins, but it can also rectify a multitude of sins. And so for me, it was a way to counteract what I had been told was undervalued, was unnecessary, and I'd never find success if I continue to go down this path. And I was like, but I want to make it like a knife edge. I want to make the beauty so poignant that it makes people want to cry, or think of God, or think of whoever God they worship. Have a sense of spirituality, have a sense of grace, which allows other people to enter. And so it was a way to counteract the often masculine, the hard, the strong, by the softness of beauty.